My boyfriend started wearing a coin bracelet on his hand without knowing where it came from. It wasn't until our wedding day when a little boy burst into the dressing room, hugged my leg, and cried out, "Please, auntie, don't take my daddy from my mommy, okay?" I found out that the coin was given to him by a woman he had a fling with as payment. He said he felt humiliated and wore it to remind himself to always stay alert. But his grandmother stood in front of the child and said to me, "If you can't accept my grandson, then don't be part of our family." My boyfriend remained silent. I stood up, took off my veil, threw away the ring, and called off the wedding in front of everyone. "Whoever wants to be this bride, go ahead." As the makeup artist fixed my hair, a little boy rushed into the room. He hugged my thigh and cried, "Auntie, please don't take my daddy from my mommy, okay?" I was shocked. When did Richard have an affair? And since when did he have such a big child? Or was this some kind of cruel joke? Too much to handle. My best friend, Kerry, supported me because I was pregnant. The child's sudden intrusion almost caused me to hit the table with my high heels. Richard finally hurried in and pulled the child away. "Mandy, it's a friend's naughty kid. Don't take it to heart. I'll take him away." His demeanor was calm, but my heart was uneasy. The child bit his hand and said through tears, "Bad daddy. Bad daddy. I belong to someone else. What's that coin on your hand for?" Everyone was stunned. The child continued, "Mom paid to buy dad, but now dad doesn't want us anymore. I'm unlucky. I was born without a dad, and now dad is marrying someone else." I looked at Richard's hand with the coin bracelet and waited for an explanation. Richard sat down, silenced the child, and apologized to me, confessing about the child and the past affair. I felt a chill from my feet to my spine. I couldn't bear it and slapped him. He didn't flinch, saying, "Do whatever you need to relieve your anger." He still thought this situation was like our past minor conflicts, not realizing the severity. He had a child yet kept it a secret until now, during my pregnancy, and on our wedding day. How is this different from deceit? Leaning against a wall for support, I took a deep breath and said firmly, "Richard, let's get a divorce." He pleaded, "No, Mandy, please don't erase all these years of love we shared." I threw a glass at him, asking how long he planned to hide the truth from me. Blood ran down his forehead, but all he did was look at me with sorrowful eyes. "Give me another chance, for the sake of our baby." I laughed and cried, mentioning our unborn child and the one behind him. Suddenly, Richard's grandmother stormed in and scolded him, asking how this was going to end and if I planned to kill Richard for compensation. She never liked me, thinking I delayed the marriage and starting a family with Richard, despite his hesitation to take on fatherhood early. She still thinks it's my fault, implying it in every way. Yet now, even though it's Richard's fault, she has no sense of fairness whatsoever. Is Mandy going to kill Richard? Or is Richard going to force her to death now? "Grandma, do you still have a conscience?" Kerry exclaimed angrily. "We have no conscience. Would we have married such an ill-mannered woman if we had no conscience? Let me tell you, Mandy, if you can tolerate my grandson, then so be it. If you can't, then don't be Richard's wife," the old lady replied. I looked at Richard. At first, he was silent, then helplessly said, "Mandy, the child is innocent." I stood up, took off my veil, and threw the ring at Richard's face. "This Richard's wife, whoever wants to be, go ahead. Richard, the wedding is off. Let's get divorced. Richard, don't spoil her too much. Let's just get a divorce." "Granny, you can't stand me enough. What are you doing here?" Kerry retorted angrily. Annoyed, Richard shouted, "Granny, do you want to make me even more irritated? Why are you meddling in this?" The old lady shrank back, then muttered in a grievous tone, "I am doing this all for you. Anyway, no matter what you do, the child cannot be left wandering outside. Otherwise, you are risking my life." Richard grabbed his hair in frustration, then pushed the two of them out of the door. Turning wearily to me, he said, "Mandy, could you be a bit more mature? After all these years of feelings, can we just break up like this? Are you so selfish that you don't even think about the baby? Do you want the baby to be born without a father, growing up in an incomplete family like you did?" He knew clearly what mattered most to me. He knew where it hurt me most, and he stabbed right there with a knife. My parents divorced when I was very young, because my father resented that I was not a boy. After the divorce, he never looked at me again. I've always been resentful about this. In my childhood, the kids in the yard often called me a fatherless wild child. My heart twisted into a knot, the pain almost suffocating me. This was the man I had once trusted the most. Kerry worriedly supported me, scolding loudly, "Richard, are you even a man? Mandy is still pregnant with your child. How can you say such things?" I grabbed Kerry's arm tightly, steadying myself, taking a breath, then coldly looked at Richard and said, Are you even worthy of being a father? What's the difference between you and the man who cheated on your mother? You've become a replica of that poor quality man. Now you are the most like your father in this world. How much love and intimacy existed between lovers, the more painful the stab from the knife would be. Richard's father cheated, his mother found out, they argued in the car and had an accident, both of them died. He trembled as he leaned on my lap, confessing this past to me. He said his father was the person he hated most in this world. He said that he hated the most those who were not loyal in relationships. But now, the person he told me that a person could never live a life without making mistakes was him. He betrayed even his past self. Richard paused, looking at me in disbelief, as if he did not expect me to say that. He raised his hand towards me, then dropped it weakly, finally slumping into a chair, too desolate to speak. The intense emotions made my stomach ache. I pulled Kerry's arm, indicating I couldn't stay here any longer. I didn't want to appear pitiful and desperate in front of a man and beg for his mercy. Kerry helped me leave. As my mother ran towards me from the crowd of guests, worried, she asked, "What's wrong, Mandy?" I tried to speak, but choked up immediately. I couldn't hold it back anymore, tears running down my cheeks uncontrollably. "Mom, Richard cheated, and I'm pregnant. This is unacceptable. Let me find him," she said. I reached out and held her. "Mom, my stomach really hurts. Can we just go home first?" She wiped away my tears anxiously, with a teary voice. "All right, let's go home, Mom will take you back home." As soon as we stepped out of the main hall, a young woman in a white dress ran after us. While my mother went to fetch water nearby, she blocked my way, crying, "I'm sorry. I really didn't know. I didn't expect this to happen. I never intended to hurt you. I won't disturb you guys. I can take the child and leave." My stomach was in such pain, and my wedding dress was soaked with sweat. I had no strength to deal with her. If I were 18 this year, maybe I would still believe such excuses, but I am 28 now. If she really didn't want this, why did she sleep with someone else's boyfriend? If she really didn't want this, why didn't she take measures? Why didn't she take emergency contraception? Why give birth to a child from a one-night stand? Didn't she know I was pregnant and couldn't handle such shocks? I didn't even have the strength to curse her. I just said coldly, "Get lost." She reached out to grab me, and I was feeling unsteady, a mix of anger and urgency. She continued sobbing as if she had no awareness. "You can blame me, but I had no choice. The child is so small and pitiful." Luckily, my mother noticed what was happening and rushed over. She pulled the woman away, delivering a slap that knocked her down to the ground, scolding, "Are you an animal? My daughter is pregnant, and all you know is how to be a mistress." She wanted to kick the woman, but because she was worried about me, she was holding me up with both hands and couldn't free herself. She said bitterly, "Get lost. Get away from me. Don't dirty my daughter's eyes. If anything happens to my daughter, I'll skin you alive, you wench." At that moment, Kerry's car happened to come up from the basement. 3 people were seen on the ground, hugging themselves, disheveled, tearful and pitiful. I didn't have the energy to deal with her anymore. Quickly, I got into the car with my mother and left that place of turmoil. As soon as I got home, I received a message from Richard. "Mandy, when did you become so rude and unreasonable? I told you I didn't want anything with her. Do you have to be so unreasonable? She's a single mother and also not having an easy time. You're also going to be a mother, so why not have some empathy?" I just felt my heart stop for a moment. This is the man I have loved for a whole 8 years. After he trampled on our relationship beyond recognition, he could still blame me like this, uttering such shameless words. I kept gasping for air, taking deep breaths. The heartache felt like a knife twisting inside me, each breath carrying sharp pains, making it unbearable. I was trembling all over. Kerry and my mom looked at me anxiously. I'm fine. It will pass. I can get through this. It will all pass." I leaned back on the sofa, as if telling them, partly telling myself. In the following days, Richard didn't contact me again, just sent a message saying, "Mandy, let's both calm down these days. When you're feeling better, I'll come get you back home." I wanted to delete him right away, but my fingers hesitated on the screen. I had to control my emotions. Chat records were evidence. He won't agree to a divorce so easily. Whenever I mentioned divorce, he would get angry, claiming it was just a moment of drunken mistake, asking me not to act impulsively. He seemed to have a complete set of self-justification. Arguing with him only gave me a headache and chest pain, so I had to be mentally prepared to face him in court. So, I chose to enable Do Not Disturb for him, but that brief message made me feel nauseous uncontrollably. I rushed to the toilet, vomiting violently, feeling like even bile would come out. My mom brought warm water for me to rinse my mouth, and then helped me back to bed. I lay there, eyes wide open, feeling utterly drained. My mom went to the kitchen to heat up some chicken soup, but I couldn't eat anything. These few days felt longer than my entire first half of life, mostly spent lying in bed or sitting on the balcony until dusk. I didn't know how to release these emotions. The sudden blow of fate caught me off guard. All expectations and dreams shattered like a bubble burst. The baby in my belly seemed to sense something, suddenly kicking with increased frequency and force, causing me excruciating pain. Kerry hurried over as soon as she finished work. My mom anxiously touched my belly and asked, "Mandy, is your stomach hurting again? Should we go to the hospital?" I closed my eyes, tears streaming down, then looked at her and said, "Yes, Mom, let's go to the hospital." To the hospital, to get rid of it. She was stunned for a moment and then hugged me, her voice choked up, "My poor daughter." Kerry handed me a tissue to wipe my tears. Unable to hold back any longer, I burst into tears. I don't know how this happened. Before that wedding, I never thought I would consider getting rid of it. These months, I've been thinking about how to be a good mother, how to raise it, how to love it. Do you know, it's been inside me for so long. I talk to it every night, and sometimes it kicks back in response. I really can't bear to do it, but I really can't bring it into this world either. I'm being selfish, compared to the child. Maybe I still love myself more. I can't imagine what it would be like if I gave birth to it. What would happen next? Kerry tightly held my hands. Mandy, you're not wrong. You're not wrong. Don't drown yourself in guilt. It's not your fault. In the current situation, the child really isn't meant to be born. She kept calling my name. My emotions gradually calmed down. Then I asked her to drive me to the hospital directly. I couldn't hesitate. I couldn't delay. Every day I waited, I would feel more attached. I needed to cut off this possibility. A certificate for induction was needed at 5 months. Hurriedly, we successfully got admitted around 2 p.m. A thick and long needle pierced my belly. My palms were sweaty, feeling both scared and guilty, wondering if the child in my belly could feel any pain. After the induction injection, until about 6 or 7 p.m., the baby was still kicking. I stared at the white ceiling, waiting for my child to gradually fade away. The kicks became less frequent and lighter, indicating its life was dissipating bit by bit. 24 hours after the induction injection, I still had no reaction. The nurse brought me another bottle of medicine. My mom and Kerry were nervously wiping my sweat, their hands shaking. Induction and abortion were not the same. The baby had to be delivered, only it would be a stillborn. They anxiously tried to find doctors and nurses, but there was no solution. Because induction was very painful, it would be long and painful. My sweat had drenched my hair. Thoughts of everything with Richard flashed through my mind. Especially when I first got pregnant, he was so excited, happy, and couldn't contain his excitement. We even attended classes together to learn how to be prospective parents. But now he betrayed us, and overnight, I had to send away this child we had dreamed of. I didn't know how long had passed. It just felt incredibly long, like a century had gone by, and the pain was still ongoing. Around 8 or 9 in the morning, my mom and Kerry helped me up, encouraging me to walk a bit to help with dilation. When the pain struck, I would crouch down, they would pat my back, trying to ease my suffering. I gritted my teeth, enduring the relentless pain. My tears seemed to have dried up. In just a few days, my emotions had gone on a rollercoaster ride, from a hopeful bride to coming to the hospital for an abortion. Kerry and her mom's eyes were swollen from crying, her mom cursing the Richards family. I watched it all in a daze, feeling like it was all just a dream. After a few hours, my stomach was in excruciating pain, as if countless steel knives were cutting back and forth. The nurse took me to the examination room, and I finally felt like the baby was coming. I lay on the bed, listening to the nurse's instructions, struggling for minutes until I finally gave birth. They asked me to look at the baby, and as I got up to see, there was a fully formed baby girl lying there. In that moment, my heart felt like it was breaking, pierced by 1,000 arrows. But I couldn't even cry, as suddenly the nurse exclaimed, "The placenta hasn't come out. We need to manually remove it." The pain was unbearable, my consciousness fading, hearing someone next to me shouting that I was bleeding heavily. Mandy was bleeding heavily. The hospital didn't have enough blood reserves, so Richard had to send out messages everywhere asking people to come and donate blood at the hospital. At that time, Mandy was busy preparing for her wedding and had created a group chat. Richard was also in that group. She was too preoccupied to think properly and even messaged all her local groups, her hands trembling as she typed. Richard found out about Mandy's abortion and heavy bleeding in a flash. He felt like lightning had struck him, his pupils contracting sharply, as if his soul had been sucked out. He messaged her, but realized he had been blocked. Luckily, he had saved her number before, but despite making several calls, no one answered. Time seemed endless, his heart beating violently, and he had never felt such panic in his life. Finally, he got her on the line. Kerry, what do you mean by that message? What do I mean? Richard, if something happens to Mandy, you will definitely not have a good ending. The call was instantly hung up, and when he called back, no one answered. Richard felt his mind go blank and instinctively ran towards the garage. He drove as fast as he could. The hospital was close to Mandy's house, but felt like it was a world away. The usually short journey suddenly long and congested, as if it would never end. Despite the air conditioning in the car, he was sweating profusely, his patience almost exhausted, until he finally reached the hospital. Luckily, the doctor said Mandy's bleeding had stopped. Some of the patient's family members felt pity and queued up to donate blood for her. Richard felt like he had finally returned to Earth and rushed anxiously towards her hospital room. As soon as he arrived at the door, there was a strong and lingering smell of blood. Mandy lay on the bed, pale and lifeless. He felt his knees go weak, almost falling down. Mandy, he called her name in fear, reaching out to touch her face, when suddenly, Mandy's eyes snapped open. The hatred in her eyes was overwhelming as she bit down on his hand with all her might. They locked eyes, and all he could see was the unmasked hatred in her eyes, making his heart ache so deeply he could hardly breathe. Her eyes stared at him with such intensity. It was as if she wanted to kill him. Mandy felt consumed by the hatred in her heart, wishing she had a knife to end him on the spot. But with nothing in her hand, all she could do was fiercely bite down on his hand with all her remaining strength. Her mouth filled with the taste of blood, yet she didn't release her grip. Richard frowned, standing there letting her bite him. It wasn't until Mandy weakened and let go that she released his hand. Her lips tainted red with blood. She spat at him before looking away in disgust. She didn't say anything else, but the look in her eyes was more painful to him than any words could have been. Richard clenched his fist and smashed it against the wall next to him, venting his frustration with full force, not feeling the pain, until blood gushed from his broken knuckles, staining the wall, and he showed no sign of stopping. I watched him self-harm coldly, and when he finally ceased, I said indifferently, Richard, let's get a divorce after I'm discharged. Do you hate me this much? Mandy, that was still your child. How could you bear to do this? Just the thought of our child being born with a father like you is enough for me to make this decision, I replied. Richard stood still, his expression numb. Leave, I don't want to see you. My mom's gone to get porridge for me, Kerry's taking care of the rest. There's no one here to chase you away. He wasn't giving up, and approached me again, pleading, Mandy, can't we just move past this? Let's start over. As he spoke, his voice choked, tears welling up in his eyes. I looked at him coldly, not saying a word. It wasn't until my mom came in with the hot porridge, placing it on the table, that she started slapping Richard repeatedly across the face. Cursed angrily, you beast. How dare you? How dare you treat her like this? Richard stood there, head hung low, not trying to evade. His cheeks quickly turned red and swollen, eyes dull and lifeless, as if he had lost his soul. Mom got tired of hitting him and kept shoving him, telling him to get out. He let his mom hit and scold him, but still refused to move. It wasn't until a nurse yelled, Are you going to take care of this child by yourselves? She handed the basin with the child to my mom. The child's blood had been wiped clean, lying there so tiny. Richard just glanced at the child, then collapsed with a stagger. He reached out to grab the child, but Kerry and two other friends, who rushed in, tightly held him back and dragged him out. He hoarsely yelled, Mandy, even if I'm wrong, the child is innocent. How could you do this? It was already formed. It was about to arrive in this world. I looked into his red eyes and the hot tears rolling down, feeling only mockery. As if I didn't know the child was innocent. It was precisely because the child was innocent that I couldn't bring him into such a situation to suffer. My poor child, I'm sorry. You were unlucky to have a mother like me. I stayed in the hospital for most of the month, and during that time, Richard came a few times, but was always driven away by my mom and Kerry. I discussed divorce with him a few times as well, but he let my mom and Kerry scold and beat him, insisting on not divorcing. It wasn't until after being discharged that the woman found me again. This time, I found out her name was Amy, and she shared everything about Richard with me. She told me how difficult it was for a young single mother like her, pregnant with a child. She showed me how well Richard and the child got along. I calmly took out my phone and took pictures of her phone. Why are you taking pictures of this? Tears still hanging on her eyelashes. I ignored her, coldly saying, Are you done? If you're done, then get out. Hopefully, this is the last time we meet. Mandy, I told you I won't fight you for a man. There are plenty of men out there. I just don't want the child to grow up without a father. Can't you at least accommodate a little child? I poured the coffee in my hand on her head. You can leave now. Richard is all yours. You can rest easy. I put down the cup and looked at her mockingly. She left angrily, and as I looked at the pictures I took and the recording, I felt sickening. But at least I had more evidence. In the days that followed, I spent money hiring 2 private detectives to follow Richard and Amy. Not surprisingly, I quickly gathered a pile of photos and videos of them kissing, hugging, dining as a family of 3, and even hugging as they entered hotels. Even in the photos, one could see Richard's pretense. One of the videos showed Amy hugging a man at a bar, while Richard angrily drank nearby. He rushed over, punched the man down when he tried to take Amy away, then dragged her to a dark corner. Amy struggled, but he pinned her to the wall and kissed her forcefully. Slowly, Amy went from resisting intensely to giving in, and then returning the kiss. Looking at my still slightly bulging belly, it constantly reminded me that there had once been a child there. Tears suddenly falling on the phone screen. More disgusting than Richard's affair was his self-satisfaction, like a performing personality clinging on and regretting. Maybe there was some sincerity between us, but his sincerity changed in an instant. He stubbornly held on to not divorcing while flirting and passionately kissing his new lover. Why should I bear all the pain and cooperate with his theatrical performance? Just the thought of him having a one-night stand and then pretending like nothing happened, while being with me for 5 years, made me feel sick to my stomach. He didn't love anyone. He just enjoyed the thrill of one-night stands while trying to convince himself that he was not like his father. With enough evidence collected, I didn't stubbornly cling to him anymore, waiting for his agreement. I directly filed for divorce at the court. Moreover, the news of me divorcing Richard started circulating online. Richard's family business was originally in the traditional clothing industry. After his parents passed away, his grandma barely supported him until he graduated. When we met, the company was on the verge of bankruptcy. It was me who modeled for him, shot videos and live-streamed to bring the company slowly back to life. We were a famous couple blogger online. Once this news spread, someone captured videos and photos of Richard and Amy being ambiguous, including the child, without me providing any evidence. Richard messaged me, angrily accusing me of even involving the child. He looked angry, saying just to get the divorce if that's what I wanted. I didn't want to argue with him a single day longer. I scheduled the divorce procedures immediately. When we entered the hall, he seemed to hesitate. Mockingly, I said, "Why suddenly forgot about your child? Don't make me look down on you." Instead of retorting, he sadly pushed the door open. The staff informed us of the 30-day cooling-off period. Suddenly feeling hopeful, Richard looked at me and said, "It's fate, Mandy." I frowned, coldly saying, "Richard, the court is right there. Let them issue the divorce certificate directly. Can't even wait for 30 days. Why the rush? What? Not in a hurry now. Those who do wrong will pay for it. If I still have your wife's title, won't I have to clean up after you again?" Richard's face instantly stiffened, then filled with disbelief. "Mandy, you're cursing me. So what? With our current relationship, do you expect me to wish you well?" Because Richard was emotional at that moment, our divorce went smoothly, and we got the divorce certificate from the court the same day. Out of guilt, he gave me more money, and I took it all. But that didn't mean I would let him off the hook. I lost a child, lost half of my life, and wasted 8 years of my youth, all because of him. If he had been honest earlier, or even told me before I got pregnant, I could have convinced myself to part amicably. But he thought that once I was pregnant, he could manipulate me and force me to endure disgusting things like swallowing a fly. He really has overthought this. He doesn't understand that I am not obsessed with my childhood, or insecure about being raised in a single-parent family. I only cared about being teased by peers because of my immature mind. After that, I cared more about feeling sorry for my mom, who raised me all by herself. Being from a single-parent family doesn't mean I don't love myself. My mother always gave me complete love, and taught me from a young age that I deserve everything and I am worthy of it all. I would never want a man who cheats and ends up with a child. Amy got my number privately and called me to say, confidently, "You have already gotten everything you wanted. Can't you let us off the hook? At least explain things online." "Sure," I smirk. "What?" She couldn't believe it, becoming a bit stuttery. "So, you really don't need an explanation?" No, I do." Her voice broke off on the phone with sobs. "I wish you happiness. Whether you believe it or not, 5 years ago, Richard and I were really just an accident. Nobody wanted to hurt you. And as for the child, he is completely innocent. They really match well, with the same performative personality, the same self-absorption. I believe you are innocent. You accidentally stripped down, accidentally let him impregnate you, accidentally forgot to take the pill, accidentally gave birth, and accidentally showed up at my wedding with a few-year-old child. Poor thing, you are just too naive. I'm really worried about your intelligence. Does the child have any mental issues? Must you speak so harshly? Never mind, ultimately, we were wrong. You can scold us however you want. Just hope you, out of consideration for the marriage, let Richard go and explain this matter. Why the rush? I'll respond shortly. Thank you. She thanked me with a shaky voice, as if she was crying again. Why cry now? There will be plenty of days for crying in the future. You're thanking me too soon. I posted that recording directly online along with my abortion operation receipt, with only 2 words written, explain it. If you want me to explain, then your own voice should be more convincing. This audio exploded on the internet, because it was intriguing, outrageous, and scandalous, ticking all the boxes for going viral. Curses flooded all the accounts of Richard's family. Richard called me from a different number to question, did it have to get this ugly? Mandy, no one wanted to hurt you. Amy is also innocent. That time, we were both not in our right minds after drinking. Yeah, you didn't want to hurt me, but I'm different now. I dream of your misfortune every night. Innocent, both of you innocent. Richard, do you think I'm stupid? So drunk that you can't remember, and can't atone later. Did nothing to address it. Did I mute you, preventing you from speaking? Then I let you deceive me for 5 years. I let you fool me until I was 5 months pregnant. Mandy, can't you move on? If you die, I can move on, but just knowing you are alive, I feel miserable. I hung up the phone directly, because the argument had no point. To make him truly bleed, to destroy what he cherished the most, to make him as miserable as I am, or even 10 times more miserable, then I can move on. I trusted him so much, wholeheartedly helping him and considering everything for him. I dealt with the social events he didn't like, either managing them or cancelling them. When his company lacked funds, I used my own savings and borrowed from friends. His grandmother, so sharp-tongued and harsh, I always bore it, trying to please her carefully, fearful of putting him in a tight spot. I thought since I wasn't living with his grandmother, I was marrying Richard the person. I believed that as long as our hearts were together, we would continue to improve and become happier. And in the end, what did I get? At the wedding, his son from a one-night stand clutched my leg, tearfully begging me not to take his dad away. My dignity, my face, along with my mother's, all trampled by their family. How can I move on? I turned on my computer, looking at the new contract in my hands, quickly reviewing and negotiating. During this time, with such high traffic, many of Richard's competitors wanted to collaborate with me. I dared not rest. Whenever I closed my eyes, I saw my child's bloody body. I used to fear the heat, but now even blowing the air conditioner a little more made me break into a cold sweat. I am in agony here, while they are playing their emotional games over there, enjoying the success I helped Richard so painstakingly build. Why? How can such a good thing exist in this world? The internet is the most miraculous thing in the 21st century. It can revive a company on the brink of bankruptcy, and also reduce a flourishing company to nothing in an instant. Richard must be having a headache recently, as online customers who want to return the product keep coming in waves. And there is a continuous stream of offline partners cancelling deals. After the divorce, I took away a large amount of cash. In just half a year, he was already in huge debt. He called countless times to try to make amends, but I rarely answered. Sometimes I would pick up, put him on speaker, play with the dog, and listen to how miserable and tough his life had become. Only then did I feel like he might actually regret his actions. What's the pain I've endured compared to a few tears he shed? His regret, was it just because he got caught by me? He needed to hit rock bottom to truly feel the pain. But when one is unlucky, misfortune always follows, and perhaps it was his karma catching up with him. Due to financial issues, he and Amy argued more and more until one day, during a drive, they had a heated argument. Amy, in a fit of anger, tried to grab the steering wheel from him, causing the car to crash into the guardrail of a mountain road. Both the car and the people inside fell off, luckily landing in lush fields, saving their lives. Unfortunately, Richard injured himself and could no longer have children. Suddenly, Amy's child became Richard's only bloodline. Richard might have developed leukemia possibly due to the accident. There was a family history of it, as his grandfather had died from leukemia, and it was unknown during his father's early death. His biological son was the most likely bone marrow match. However, the child who looked so much like him turned out not to be his biological offspring. Richard had never done a DNA test all this time. The shock caused the old lady to faint. Amy tried to run away, but was found by the old lady right after leaving town. As Richard's health slightly improved and he was discharged from the hospital, the old lady and Amy got into a dispute and both fell from the rooftop. The old lady was left partially paralyzed, and Amy was left paralyzed from the waist down. When I learned of all this, I quickly sold all assets and left town with Kerry and my mom. The money I made during this time was enough for a worry-free life. We all agreed not to pursue the matter further. As we left, passing by the hotel where the wedding took place, it felt like a surreal dream. I recalled 2 lines from a book I read. Things of the past are as dead as yesterday. What lies ahead is as alive as today. My life is still long, and I will start anew. Richard's epilogue. I don't know why I kept that coin all those years ago. I just remember the provocative note on the nightstand after a passionate night. I thought of discarding the coin, but picked it up instead. I thought the matter was settled until Amy showed up with the child. My grandmother, and she tried to persuade me, saying the child was innocent. Mandy was going to be a mother herself and wouldn't be so ruthless. But not only was she cruel to others, but also to herself. Without a word, she terminated our child. Seeing the child's lifeless body, I had nightmares for a whole month. My life seemed to spiral out of control. However much Mandy once loved me, she now hated me equally. No matter how I tried to comfort her, she couldn't move past it. She saw me as her mortal enemy and destroyed everything step by step. One bad thing happened after another, and I didn't even have time to react. I received news of my grandmother and that woman falling off the rooftop together just after leaving the hospital. My company went bankrupt, and the child wasn't mine. Due to this farce, I lost my biological child, Mandy, and everything. My life was chaos. That woman was taken away by her family, and I discovered she had other one-night stands, not just with me. She couldn't tell whose child it was and wanted to give the baby to me because of the resemblance. The child was eventually taken to an orphanage. Not being mine, I couldn't bear to raise it, especially with my own struggles. The bone marrow donor only matched at 8 Loki, which barely met the requirements. However, I couldn't wait and had to use it. This meant severe rejection reactions. I had to take lots of medicine daily. My grandmother was partially paralyzed, and I couldn't afford a caregiver while still needing to work. Eventually, I had no choice but to swallow my pride and ask Mandy for help. We'd been together for 8 years, during which she loved me deeply. I thought seeing me in such a sorry state might move her a bit. Would she help me just a little out of the past affection? Dignity couldn't fill my stomach, and I struggled just to stay alive, as my grandmother only had me left. But she was gone for good. How heartless she was. Now I had no one else and no motivation to live on. I drove to the place where my parents left. In the quiet night, with weeks of heavy rain, I saw my parents arguing in the car, looking back at me. In the mist, I seemed to witness their past accident once more. Suddenly, it felt like I fell from where they had to a deep cliff. Various images raced through my mind in such a short time. The last image stuck was me crying on Mandy's lap, bitterly saying, "He was unfaithful."